Libertarians don't like Israel. That's
Don't like Israel.
not news, not universally true, in part because it's not 100% clear what the definition of libertarianism is and who is a libertarian and who is not. But it is clear from the statements of many of them, some of the more prominent libertarians on Twitter are kind of more open about it and where they stand and less restrained in how they express it. Today we're actually going to talk about somebody who is seemingly one of the better ones. He's what is it? Research fellow at the Cato Institute, and he gets published in big magazines like Time. But he also is not a fan of Israel and thinks the U.S. Should kind of shift its policy, which is a whole issue in and of itself. I'm joined by Jonathan, Marco, Richard. Guys, I'm just gonna go in to the first paragraph and let's talk about the content of this. I think it's a short article, but there's a lot to say about it. So yeah, this is John Hoffman. I don't know if I mentioned his name. He's a research fellow in defense and foreign policy at the Cato Institute. This is from this article that was published in Time. It says his research interests include U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, Middle East geopolitics, and political Islam. The most libertarian of ideologies. All right, let's get to the article itself. As Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu faces a joint session of Congress, Washington must finally face reality. Its emphatic embrace of Israel's war in Gaza is not advancing U.S. interests or promoting regional stability, to say nothing of the intense human toll. Jonathan, your thoughts?
Good evening. Thank you, Razi. Well, the what are the US interests in the Middle East? I don't think that's a question he answered. Correct me if I'm wrong in this article. He talks about the interests, but I'm not sure what exactly they are, other than not escalating and not causing for more deaths. How is that against American interest exactly? How is the deaths, so-called famine, as he calls it later in the article, how is that against American interest? I would argue that a famine in Gaza is very much aligned with American and Israeli interests. But yeah, nothing more at this point. Let's continue.
Marco?
Yeah, it's almost like these libertarians don't really have much of a principle behind them. To pick out the fact that the involvement of the US is an emphatic embrace of Israel's war in Gaza. It's a push at best, because really they're even withdrawing supply of weapons to Israel because they are, held hostage by a bunch of Islamic voters in their own United States. So first of all, the premise is a bit fallacious here, and then throwing in the human toll, taking it totally out of the context of October the 7th to start with. So you start the article without even talking about the fact that currently Israeli people and some US citizens are held hostage by the people in Gaza. So that's a big no in my mind. But as Jonathan said, let's carry on and have a good laugh.
Yeah, I mean, this is Libertarians for Palestine. That's what we're analysing here. But I mean, they'll take anything, won't they? They'll take Jews for Palestine, gays for Palestine, libertarians, headless chickens. Although those last two categories probably overlap quite a lot. But so long as you hate Israel, so long as you hate the Jews, you're in. You can have a balloon and a seat. But in terms of this first paragraph, this emphatic embrace, as if such emotionalism in the terminology for a start. And then, of course, you've always got, in all of these kind of articles, you've always got, it's Israel versus fog. And you can't analyze what the fog is. So you go back to criticizing Israel all the time. There's never an enemy here that isn't Israel. There's no Hamas. There's no terrorism. There's no mass murder of Israelis. There's no ideology to be criticized, despite his knowledge of the ideology from his biog. So back to criticizing Israel again.
Yeah, by the way, being not a fan of Netanyahu, one of my favorite moments of his speech yesterday was when he said gays for Palestine is like chickens for KFC, expecting a big applause, like he just came up with it, and people were like, yeah, we've heard this one. By the way, overall, a really good speech. I just wish he actually acted on it. Marco, you said it's a stretch to say the US supports Israel. It's not a stretch. It's called a lie. It's an actual lie. Like, they don't support Israel. They support the other side, and they supported Israel, verbally right after October 7th. And when Israel actually started acting on making sure it doesn't happen again, then they switched sides. Biden, in his statements, really just repeats Hamas talking points, demands that Israel capitulate more to the Palestinians. So this is one of the many libertarian fantasies here. Let's go back. And by the way, I should have read the second paragraph as well, which is a short one, but the previous one said Israel's war is not advancing U.S. interests or promoting regional stability, to say nothing of the immense human toll. In fact, it is doing the opposite. So long as Washington refuses to change course, the U.S. will continue to confront major problems that are the product of its own policies. Actually, I do want to stop here, even though I was going to go to the next one, because this is kind of indicates something that libertarians have been saying since forever, which is this blowback theory. This came up at after 9/11. It was blowback. It was it was these poor victims. This is not how the advocates of this theory describe it, but essentially these poor victims had to fight back against U.S. intervention in the Middle East. And this is kind of what is indicated here as well, that the U.S. interests are harmed because the savages, which you have to kind of acknowledge in like within this theory, the savages might come for us as well. Jonathan.
Yeah, I think one thing I found very disgusting throughout this article is the complete failure to mention anything about October 7th, anything about the hostages, about the American lives that have been taken by the Palestinians, as if it has absolutely nothing to do with reality, as if this is just a war that came from the sky and the US is now so heavily involved. I think it's just despicable for somebody to write something like that, completely ignore all the lives lost, completely ignore all the destruction, the people who are now in captivity. I think that's very despicable. And such a statement is probably, such an article is probably possible only by libertarians or communists, people of that kind. They're the only ones I think can ignore reality that much and write. Even if you are a softer leftist, you would still say, give some lip service to October 7th, or you will still, perhaps even today, that's rarer and rarer, but I still see some lip service. Here, there is absolutely none.
Yeah, by the way, for people in the chat confusing libertarians with librarians, no, librarians are actually a force for good in the world. Marco.
It's not just lefties and libertarians do this kind of stuff. It's everybody who feels that the so-called Palestinians are the underdog and the people oppressed in the story, really, that come up with this kind of crap. And usually they do that because really their intention is to support Hamas, to show that even this bunch of savages, I've got a culture that has got something to show for. So we are not perfect. So who are we to 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 actually call them out and then point out that they are savages. But libertarian, we know that, and we're going to attract lots of flack here from people who sort of believe in capitalism and all this kind of stuff, because they think that as students of objectivism we should side with them. But again, the problem is they don't see the big picture. They don't understand that you cannot start with a political premise and create some sort of view of the world which doesn't stand on itself. You can't take liberty as a primary when you actually don't know why liberty is the fundamental that you base all your theory on. And then that's why you come up with this kind of statement, because you really are unable to drill into the essential of the issue and realize that actually it's not just about material return. It's not about quid pro quo. It's about looking at the big pictures and deciding which side are you on. Are you pro-life, or are you pro any bully or savage that comes to your door and start throwing weapons at you? Are you supposed to give in? Are you not supposed to give in? Should you defend yourself? They're oblivious to all this. That's why this kind of articles and this kind of statements are made from the people who are not actively promoting Hamas, really.
And of course, Islamists in the Middle East were burning the Stars and Stripes long before 9/11. Blowback had nothing to do with it. It's the ideals of America that they hate, and to confuse the two and reverse the cause and effect is to miss the whole picture. Because I mean, fear of blowback, as Marcus said there about bullies. I mean, you don't stop bullies by stepping back and allowing them to continue bullying and encouraging and emboldening further bullying by others. You have to tackle it, and the blowback is for the bully, not for you. And when it comes to savages, will come for you, will come for the US. Yes, they certainly will, as soon as they finish with Israel. And that's why Israel is at the forefront of civilization at the moment, and the forefront of the war which needs to be fought in order to defend civilization against the barbarism which is well and truly at the gates.
Yeah, and speaking of Stars and Stripes being burnt in the Middle East, it was also burnt in Washington yesterday by those people who, I think one of their representatives in the chat says that people care about human rights. Well, of course, that's how you express your support for human rights, by burning the U.S. flag, because the U.S. allows and invites the leader of the only free country in the Middle East to speak to its Congress. Yeah, it's a shame.
Sorry, Razi. I mean, so this guy is effectively saying that we should create a state which is based on religious intolerance and hate for a group, because we need to uphold human rights. So this guy should have the right to take away the rights to everybody who's not a Muslim. That's nice. Very, very good logic.
Well, the comment by this troll, and I'll remind people of our policy that we don't name trolls, but sometimes we will read their comments. The entire panel doesn't understand that most of the world recognize universal human rights. I mean, this is often how these people, to his credit, this is a very rare occasion where there's a complete sentence that's somewhat coherent. But of course, it's coherent in that you can understand the words. It's not coherent in the sense that the words don't mean what he would like us to think they mean. Because if you support human rights, you support a system of government that protects the rights of humans. And unfortunately, we don't have a perfect system like that anywhere in the world, but we have places that are much closer to it. And in the Middle East, we only have one such place. And if you are a supporter of all the savages who want to destroy that one place, you are an enemy of human rights. And I think this person probably somewhere deep down inside knows it. Thank you, Robert Naser, who has been a member for 27 months of the YouTube channel. Robert says, libertarians no longer believe in man at his best, nor at his worst. They never did. They praise nothing good and condemn nothing evil. Yeah, and you know, Ayn Rand, when the libertarian movement was born, kind of around the time that she was active, had a similar criticism of the movement, and she very much acknowledged that they bastardized her ideas, took some of the political ideas, you know, completely destroyed them by adding things or removing things that were important, and said, let's do away with the whole foundations that lead you to that in metaphysics, in epistemology, and in ethics. Yeah, that's why you have libertarians eventually going to these extents where they support really the worst regimes in the world when it comes to you know, liberty, if that's what you are actually for. All right, speaking of libertarians, more of this guy. So Netanyahu, I continue reading. Netanyahu remains wedded to the idea that Israel's army can achieve his goal of eradicating Hamas in Gaza. But as IDF spokesman Daniel Hagari recently admitted, quote, anyone who thinks we can eliminate Hamas is wrong, end quote. In the military realm, the group maintains operational capacity and continues to fight in areas of Gaza where Israel previously claimed Hamas had been eliminated. U.S. intelligence estimates that only 30 to 35% of Hamas's military wing have been killed since October 7th, while claiming it has recruited thousands of new volunteers over the course of the war. Hamas also remains deeply embedded in the political fabric of Gaza. I love it when people who are generally completely wrong about everything actually make the point that we've been making all along. Yeah, Israel, of course, is not winning militarily because it is more focused on, even in terms of its goal of releasing the hostages, which is, of course, a positive goal, that is placed above defeating Hamas, which would prevent future hostage taking and future October 7th style attacks, but also of feeding its enemy. Yeah, you recruit people when you you know, can feed them and say, look, we're feeding you as a reward for what we've done in the past. We do more of this, we get more support, spiritual and material, from the world. So yeah, Jonathan.
Well, first of all, Daniel Hagari should have been fired the moment he has said that statement. I think it's a disgrace that he's still serving as the spokesperson for the IDF, and we see the destructiveness of it in this article where he's quoted by Israel's enemies. Now, he's doing something, I think, that's very malicious with this paragraph, where this is as close, I think, as he gets to kind of paying lip service for Israel's actions, but he's saying, oh, it's actually impossible what you're doing. It might be nice in theory to eradicate Hamas, but it's actually not possible. The more you try to kill it, the more it grows, and which is irrational. But yeah, that's what he's doing there. There's one thing about libertarians that I think this is an example of everywhere in the world where there is a conflict between a state that it is fundamentally good and a state that is bad. They would go with the bad state. A state is country. They would go with the less functioning country because it shows that their case for an anarchy makes sense. And every time they see a successful country, it shows them as a negative. Then why we need an anarchy if we can have a good functioning state like Israel or America, despite all the problems? Why should we have that? Why should we disband that state if it's functioning? So they need Israel to be destroyed, because then there will be one more functioning state gone from the earth. So they support the anarchy, which is in Gaza. It's an anarchical state, along with the rest of the nations he mentions here. These are all anarchies. So I find it very natural for the libertarian to support such countries as Syria, Yemen, Lebanon, and Gaza. These are all anarchies.
Marco.
Yeah, I mean, reading this paragraph, it makes you wonder whether the guy actually has got an agenda that he's trying to cover, because this little paragraph, there's few lines are so packed with stuff. For example, he says, he quoted Hagari. To be honest, taking it out of context. He was talking about that behind Hamas there is an ideology which is impossible to defeat physically. But he just used it to his own purpose. And then he effectively saying that Israel has been lying to people by saying that the area in Gaza had been cleared from Hamas terrorists. You see, they admit they are lying to us. Israel is a liar. And then at the same time, he admits that Gaza is Hamas, but this political fabric, embedded political fabric that he's talking about. This whole thing is just design. It's just a preamble to tell you, America, you've been lying to. You should pull out of it because I've got my own reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Michael just said there. I mean, I don't take quite as harsh a view as Jonathan there on Daniel Hagari, although I do understand how those words are twisted against, and used against him, and that is the problem with saying anything with any level of nuance to it, knowing that full well that it's going to be twisted out of all context. Because obviously the ideology can't be defeated simply in this way, and of the immense human toll that this the author of this article mentions in the first paragraph is evidently not immense enough if it hasn't been sufficient to change the ideology among those embedded in the political fabric of Gaza, i.e. the Palestinian people. Without defeating the ideology and the military infrastructure, then you aren't going to defeat Hamas, and it is going to resprout in the areas that you claim to have already cleared. I mean, that much is true. It's just the way it's presented is twisted towards a certain agenda.
Michael in the chat accuses us of being collectivist by making blanket condemnations about a diverse group of political activists. By the way, I'm naming him because I don't think he is a full-time troll. He's just disagreeing with us as far as I can tell. And he mentions objectivists have libertarian allies such as Gloria Alvarez. So look, I said at the beginning, because libertarianism is not clearly defined, there are good people who call themselves libertarians and hopefully will just come to stop doing that. And like, obviously, if you're accusing us of that, Gloria Alvarez was a regular co-host of the Daily Objective from episode 1. I encourage you to go back and watch those. And yeah, we have allies in the free market movement, but we have to acknowledge that we have enemies. And we have enemies certainly among people who call themselves libertarians. By the way, much more so, I think, in the United States than elsewhere. And look, just look at their main representative. Look at the Libertarian Party. That is not a force for good in the world. And if you don't see that as an issue, that is a shame, and you should watch this channel a bit more. Yes, Marco.
Sorry, I mean, we're not saying that every libertarian is bad. All we're saying that if you start an argument with a libertarian and ask why, it gets to a point when they cannot tell you why they do and say what they say, because as I said earlier on, they haven't got an integrated, complete philosophy behind it. They start with a political point, and then they build a whole a set of ideas on top of it. But as I said earlier on, if you haven't got the reason why, based in the factual reality, why you're doing what you're doing, which I'm afraid Ayn Rand was able to do from the very bottom, from the metaphysics up to the politics and aesthetics even. She can tell you why she's making a statement, while a libertarian gets up to a point and then he has to rely on something. Something tells me that, and that's a weakness, because when you find yourself arguing with the enemies of capitalism, the people who push for totalitarianism and all this kind of stuff, you fall over, and you don't want to start having a debate, libertarian versus objectivism, but ultimately Ayn Rand made the point that Rothbard and the others actually took, plagiarized a conclusion in politics and ran with it. And if
and also, if you start with liberty as your primary, then you end up very quickly with that moral equivalence that Robert was talking about in the chat, where you don't condemn one man as opposed to praising the next, regardless of what he does, because everyone's free to do whatever. And that's what ends up with somebody supporting Palestine in the way that this guy in this article is.
If I may also say something about this, Razi, the vast majority of libertarians I meet, especially in Europe, they're at best weak in Israel, and they will say something if I ask them, but they wouldn't go and start and have a conference where they have even a single session. If they have 2-day conference, which I've attended, they did not have a single session to mention Israel. We're talking about 1,000 people libertarian conference. They would talk all day about Ukraine. They would talk about let's end the drug war, but they wouldn't say a word about Israel unless it's provoked. And sometimes they will say something good, and sometimes they also say something bad and nasty, as they have done as well. So if you are considering yourself a libertarian and you see all these people around you are being so bad on this crucial moral issue, you should ask yourself, am I right to associate myself with that name? Perhaps I should distance myself from it. Perhaps I should go explore other philosophies or resort to other names, because it puts you around the wrong people.
Yeah. The thing with these often with these free market conferences is you meet some good people, and then you meet some absolutely horrible people, and that's what happens when you want to have a big tent. You're gonna have people who are kind of in the right direction, and people who their very presence there makes you question if this is a positive movement or not, and which is why the big tent idea is not necessarily a positive thing. Chandler, I have to say your issue with librarians, you've been going to the wrong libraries. That's my conclusion from that. Thank you, Ginger, for the super chat. Ginger says libertarians argument end with, and then a miracle happens. Yes, and we'll read some more of this article, and to Marco's point about when you ask them the question why, everything falls apart. It can get worse than that. People like John Hoffman have an answer to the question why, and that answer makes you wish that they didn't. Thank you, Robert Naser, for the super chat. Robert says, thank you for discussing this topic seriously. That's no mean feat when dealing with today's libertarians, but they do need to be called out. Thank you. Yes, they do, and we will call them out whenever necessary. What libertarians could use? Well, they could use principles. They could use a more reality-oriented approach. But even if we're just talking about politics, they could use somewhat better knowledge of the U.S. Constitution. And one way to get that knowledge is to join James Valiant's course on the Constitution. The third session is today. It is only for ARCUK members at the Reardon Medal or Midas Mulligan levels. Those are expensive. It's worth it for a bunch of other reasons, but certainly for this reason. And you get past recordings as well, but you also can have access to that course and to the past lesson for a week if you're a member, YouTube member at the Inner Circle level, which we just launched recently. You get other perks, including joining us once a week, sometimes more than that, on our production meeting, which is its whole thing. What happens in the production meeting stays at the production meeting, even if you are a Inner Circle member. That's part of the contract. Thank you, Jukes, for the super chat. Jukes says, in appreciation for all you do, the truth. Thank you. And all right, should we continue? I'm trying to filibuster because we've had enough of this article, but we still have more to go through, so let's do it. So the article continues. Israel can degrade Hamas's capabilities and kill their leaders, but without a route towards a credible political solution, Palestinian militancy will persist. Unfortunately, there is no sign of such a solution. Netanyahu's apparent plan moving forward is the indefinite military occupation of the enclave, and Israel's parliament recently passed a motion with overwhelming support rejecting Palestinian statehood, even if it is part of a negotiated settlement with Israel. This is a recipe for endless violence. Okay, so this one paragraph, and I think this is true of other paragraphs, but it's certainly true of this one. We could do a whole show just on this paragraph because there's so much bullshit. Even for a libertarian, this is almost an achievement. I want to go through some of it. So first of all, I'll go in order of appearance. You can kill their leaders, but without a political solution. Well, no, you can kill their soldiers as well, and you can kill their moral support, and you can make the Palestinian people regret backing or at least not fighting against Hamas, like was done in all the successful wars in the past, and has not been done in all the unsuccessful wars where you try to feed your enemy. Like everything he says, history and not that distant history tells you exactly the opposite. So this is, again, he has an answer to the why in some cases, but it's absolutely it's almost incomprehensible. But then talking about a political solution, and this is what the anti-Israel but not flag burning people do, which is worse, of course, than flag burning, is they talk about a political solution, and then they blame the victim of the war, the country that has been attacked, and all wars it's been involved in have been started against it, and all it wants is peace. It blames them for the fact that there is no peace. So he's blaming Israel, where Israel has basically offered again and again pretty much everything the Palestinians supposedly want, except what they really want, which is the annihilation of the Jews, which Israel seems to kind of be reluctant to agree to. So, but there is no blame against the people who started this current war, who slaughtered everybody they could, who to this day refuse to end the war by releasing the hostages and laying down their arms. So, and then bringing up this motion, which again passed 68-9. So it wasn't overwhelming. It's just a bunch of people didn't want to be associated with a vote against it at the time of war, but it's not overwhelming. It's pretty close. 68 out of 120 is not an overwhelming majority. Yeah, it's this has not been Israel's policy for the past 30 years. Israel's policy, both left and right-wing governments, has been there should be a Palestinian state. Let's give them what they want, and then again, they end up finding out that what they really want is no Israel, and that doesn't work. Jonathan.
Yeah, what he's essentially saying is that if Israel defends itself, it's a recipe for endless violence. That's what he's saying. The very existence of Israel is a recipe for violence. So he's essentially justifying. If he's not saying anything against the violence, he lets it happen. He's fine with it. I think essentially is justifying it because he doesn't have anything to say against it. He only has accusations against the victims, as you said, Razi. So as I read it, he's standing with evil. That's what he's saying. It, yeah.
Marco. Yeah, a credible political solution. What does it mean? Blank. We don't know. He doesn't know. Well, we know he knows. It means two-state solution, where Palestinian state is supposed to live peacefully with Israel. But we know very well that Palestinian states has got only the intention of wiping out Israel in the first place. So such a solution is not a solution at all. But then again, he said earlier on that you can't destroy Hamas anyway, and that's why he's making this point. By just suggesting a political solution, he knows very well he's suggesting a two-state solution. And then again, and that's why you should come to an agreement with the monster of Hamas, because you can't win anyway. So you might well release all the terrorists that are held in Israeli jails and exchange them for perfectly innocent civilians, which were taken on October 7th. This whole thing lacks moral basis at all. This guy is a monster, really. And then this creative solution business is like, it betrays so much what he wants to do. The overwhelming support of the Palestinian parliament, really.
Now, when I look at this paragraph, I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but when these articles have their hyperlinks within them that choose to embolden certain phrases within it, and you end up with the phrase "apparent plan, indefinite military occupation past," leaping out of the page from three separate parts of the paragraph, it really does look like the editors are trying to suggest that it was a plan to indefinitely militarily occupy Gaza, as opposed to withdrawing from Gaza as they did in 2005, allowing Gazans to run their own country, and of course seeing that they immediately chose violence and the death cult that has been part of their culture and their leadership ever since. So yeah. It's depressing to look at how easy it is for the message to be in there, repeatedly emphasized, not just by the writer, but also by the way in which the article is presented. And then, of course, there's always this recipe for endless violence phrase, this violence that floats around like a wind, and is therefore attributed to both sides without mentioning either. But of course, we know where the endless violence comes from, and we know what would bring this to an end. It would be the end of that violence that comes from the ideology of wanting to murder your neighbor simply because he's Jewish and because Israel exists. And if that stopped and the hostages were returned, the recipe would already be making the cake of peace, if you like. There would already be at least a future for peace, which is not going to magically appear, as Ginger said, by some miracle. It's going to need that ideology to be surrendered and given up on and rejected by the very people who've held it, by seeing the consequences of it.
So I have to say a couple of things. One is, the troll I mentioned earlier who talked about human rights and so on. Now I see that he is also a 9/11 conspiracy theorist. So big surprise there. And you mentioned the hyperlinks. I haven't clicked on any of them, but it did remind me. Last night I was basically scrolling through Google, and I got a recommendation for a Guardian article fact-checking Netanyahu's speech in Congress yesterday. I recommend to people to read that. I'm also thinking kind of on the spot, and I think I want to do a TDO on it, maybe Saturday, although we already have a topic for Saturday, which is going to be on Friday. Now it's Saturday. We might push it to Sunday so that I can do that fact-checking. It's not surprising, and yet it's surprising that The Guardian thinks so little of its readers that, well, look at the fact check that they did. I recommend it, and watch Saturday's episode. All right, more of this guy. Meanwhile, the carnage Washington is subsidizing in Gaza is seriously damaging America's global standing. As many feared in the wake of the October 7th Hamas attack, the war has gone well beyond prevention and self-defense, drawing analogies to the U.S. response to 9/11. This fucking asshole. All right. Should we stop here? Or actually, no. You want to stop? All right, let's pause here.
I think it's just hilarious sentence. Meanwhile, the carnage Washington is subsidizing in Gaza is seriously damaging America's global standing. Where do libertarians talk about the importance of global standing? And what, like, is Gaza really subsidized? The carnage is really subsidized by Washington? What is my tax money doing? Where does that go? It's really, really outrageous. Yeah.
Yeah, that wasn't even, I didn't even think of that point, because there is, again, so much that he manages, he really packs so much bullshit into so little space. But yeah, there's that, there's the global standing. Look, the global standing is, remember, when you think about global standing and you kind of treat every country as an equal in the UN General Assembly sense, then the US global standing is already as low as can be, because it's the birthplace of freedom, it's of political freedom. And it's still the freest, or one of the freest countries in the world. That's why the US is hated. It's free and it's successful.
And also America is the biggest superpower in the world. Why does it need good global standing? All economies are relying on the US currency. Everybody needs America as a trade partner for everything. Why should it care about the global standing from these evil dictatorships, especially who support Gaza?
But then the last part I read was the drawing analogies to 9/11. The analogies to 9/11 are absolutely valid, to the US response to 9/11. But before that, he says the war has gone well beyond prevention and self-defense, drawing analogies to the US response to 9/11. What does that mean? Again, like the problem with the US response to 9/11 is they picked the easiest targets to get a coalition around. They gave aid to the enemy, and they didn't defeat the enemy, as opposed to the US response to Pearl Harbor, which was, cities turned to rubble and countries turned to civilize. That was what was done then. And now we are fighting with kid gloves, and there are people who still think that the other side is better. Marco.
Yeah, I mean, the carnage Washington is subsidizing Gaza implies that Israel is causing a carnage, isn't it? Because this guy hasn't heard what happened to over 1,000 people. People were celebrating a day off, people were at a concert, and people were taken, including children and old people in the 70s or 80s were taken from their home and kept as hostages. And some people are still there, over, about 100 people are still there. The carnage comes from Israel's side, isn't it? Because Israel initiated this. Wow. And then this goes well beyond prevention and self-defense. What have they prevented October the 7th? Because October 7th happened. What can the strike preempt if not leaving them to destroy Hamas right to the end? How are you going to ever prevent something like this happening if the people and the infrastructure and the ideas that cause this is still in place? So prevention will be done once Hamas is wiped out of history, really. And the self-defense has got nothing to do with the response to the US to 9/11. As you pointed out, if the US had defended themselves after 9/11, it would have finished there. Would have never heard about Islamist violence ever again. But it's still there, clearly.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that point about prevention and self-defense, I mean, this guy in this very article admits the fact that that Hamas have sprouted up again in areas that the Israelis have supposedly cleared of Hamas already. So how has it gone well beyond prevention if Hamas is still there and still able to flourish and still able to be reborn? And of course, where the self-defense requires that they don't exist anymore. It requires that they aren't able to carry out another October the 7th. I mean, you guys have covered it well, but I mean, yeah, this is highly distilled bullshit. This is single malt.
Yeah, Akira, by the way, I see that the whole conversation after Akira's comment was basically everything I wanted to say, but I'll say it anyway so we have it in spoken and not just written form. So Akira says, Netanyahu should be put on trial for being such a wimp. And yeah, as WUB points out, and I'm no legal expert, but being a wimp is not technically against the law. What is in Israel against the law is treason. And Netanyahu's policy with regard to the Palestinians objectively is treasonous. Feeding your enemy at a time of war. If anybody had done this, if any, left-wing Israeli on October 7th at night or October 8th in the morning, when Israel's official policy was still, there will be no humanitarian aid until the hostages are released. If some left-wing person had said, you know what, I'm going to go and give food and medicine to Hamas, they would be arrested for treason. So why is it okay for the leadership to do it? Thank you, Apollo Zeus, for becoming a YouTube member. This tells me that it's been a month since that moment when Apollo Zeus gifted a YouTube membership and it was gifted to him. That was an interesting moment where we discovered a new thing we didn't know about how YouTube works. All right. All right. I again would rather filibuster, but let's continue. Actually, we stopped mid-paragraph, so yeah. Israel's campaign is also planting the seed of future turmoil by killing thousands of innocent civilians, crippling Gaza's infrastructure, and producing a famine. The effects of this war will plague Gaza for generations, and Washington's involvement, most critically the provision of the weapons responsible for much of the killing, makes a mockery of the US's claim to lead a liberal or rules-based international order. All right, we have had, I think, several shows calling bullshit on the famine claim and showing how the famine claim is a thing that comes up from time to time, usually every few years, now in the past year, every few months. But it's a thing that people claim. There's about to be a famine in Gaza, therefore, Israel is committing a genocide or whatever, whatever solutions these people offer that end up rewarding Hamas. But yeah, this again goes back to the idea that if you actually fight a war fully, which Israel is not doing, then you create more terrorists rather than defeat the enemy's desire to fight against you. He also in this half of the paragraph blames Israel for the killing of innocent civilians in a war that was started by Hamas and continues because of Hamas, and in which Hamas hides in civilian infrastructure. And he talks about the destruction of infrastructure. Again, that infrastructure is what? The hospitals and schools where Hamas hides or uses as munitions warehouses, or the tunnels. That infrastructure has been severely damaged, and good, not severely enough. By the way, the same goes for civilian infrastructure. But remember, this is what the Palestinians use the enormous amounts of aid they get, international aid, and have been for decades. They use it to find better ways to kill Jews and get away with it. And this is what this person wants to see them be able to get away with more. Jonathan.
Yeah, just on the famine, yeah, that's true. There's no famine, and that's not a good thing. There should have been a famine, and there should not be food, at all. If you initiate a war, you shouldn't get food from the person you are attacking. And the fact that there is still they have better food than a lot of other places in the world right now in Gaza. This is a huge black stain on this government of Israel. It shows the immorality of the way it wages war, the immorality of the IDF, who is also executing this policy. They should have refused the order. And there should not be food if you're attacked. You did October 7th. You deserve to not have food. You should rebel. You should surrender. You should do anything in your ability to make sure that this war ends as soon as possible with your government surrender, with the surrender of the Palestinians. They should have rebelled against the Hamas, who also take this food that we send them, right? They steal from them the food. Why are they letting this happen? Why are they just continuing to support their government? A lot of the Palestinians, I would say, especially in these areas, they are not pro-Israel. They're right. They will be happy if Israel withdraws. They will be happy to hear more soldiers of that. They will celebrate. These are enemy populations. They deserve to starve, and it's a shame that they're not starving.
Marco.
Yeah. Oh, God. Planting a seed of future turmoil by killing thousands of innocent civilians. Well, first of all, call me collectivist, but I can guarantee you that thousands of innocent civilians didn't die. Perhaps, 2 or 3 of them died innocent. But what kind of ignoramus is this guy? He's never heard the fact that we dropped 2 nukes on Japan, and far from sowing seeds for future trouble. Actually, they are allies. They are some of our best and preferred allies. So this idea that by fighting a war in self-defense and destroying an Islamic fueled bunch of savages will cause future problems, that's flawed in the first place. And not only flawed, but it's a coward's attitude to how deal with bullies. And then, okay, the famine business is not even to be mentioned. And this whole idea, this whole paragraph is just I can't imagine what's passing in this guy's head at this point when he's writing this, because it's just fake. The fact
It absolutely is fake. And I mean, look, they're killing thousands of innocent civilians, October the 7th. Those were the innocent civilians that were killed in over 1,000 of them. But of course, you don't choose to mention that, or at least emphasize it at all. And this rules-based order that your international order that you're focusing, well, the only thing that seems to be coming out of the supposed rules-based international order at the moment seems to be the rule that you should fund and feed your enemy, and seems to be that it's illegal to defend yourself against an aggressor. And those aren't the kind of that's not the kind of rules-based international order that anybody should be standing up for. They should be standing up against that. And of course, well, the underlying tone of this article, as of course is a key tenet of all libertarian criticisms, is of course the spending of US tax dollars. But of course, there's no mention here of the US tax dollars that go into funding UNRWA or funding the humanitarian efforts that are only prolonging this war. No, it's only money which goes to Israel, which is their only focus, and that tells you an awful lot.
Yeah, speaking of innocent civilians, and this is ironic. I mean, this article was published a few hours before 5 bodies of hostages were found in Gaza. I don't know if they would have been mentioned if the article had been published after, but yeah, it tells a lot. All right, before we get to the last 2 paragraphs, speaking of really disgusting things and people that we talk about on this show, tomorrow is going to be no different. Last week we talked on the reality show about this BBC article that presented Israel as going in and killing a 24-year-old guy with Down syndrome. An IDF dog killed him, and basically this was something that Israel did and does. And we treated the article while saying this is problematic journalistically, and both in the content of the article and the fact that this is a news story as far as the BBC is concerned. But what if it's true? And went through it that way. Well, it's not. It's certainly not true the way the BBC reported it. I don't think the reporter thought it was true, yet they reported it the way they did. It made it through whatever editing they have there. And we will talk about it tomorrow on the reality show. We have 5 people. We try not to have more than 4 people on this show, but I think we're all going to have to occasionally, take a breather and have a sick bag next to us just in case. If you see one of us go off camera, that's to avoid going viral for the wrong reasons. Before that, on the Daily Objective, I will be joined by Tal Tzfani, who recently came back from Israel, the president and CEO of the Ayn Rand Institute. He will tell us what lessons he learned from his trip to Israel, other than what it's like to spend all day, every day with Yonatan. He was also, I believe that was the case, more or less, or maybe not. We'll find out tomorrow. Ask him in a super chat. All right. We will get through these last. I'm going to read the 2 paragraphs, and then we'll comment on them. All right. Finally, there is a growing chance of regional escalation and deeper direct U.S. involvement. The war has already set off a wave of regional escalation from Lebanon to Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and between Israel and Iran directly. Israel and Hezbollah are especially close to a devastating war. The U.S. chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff CQ Brown recently warned both that Iran would likely provide considerable help to Hezbollah, which has a huge arsenal of missiles that can penetrate deep into Israel, and that U.S. forces in the region could be pulled into that conflict. Such a war is anathema to U.S. interests and Middle East stability. The risks of regional war and direct U.S. involvement will remain elevated as long as Israel's campaign in Gaza continues. All right, that's the end of the article. But it's interesting how at the end it kind of we find out that it's Israel's campaign in Gaza that's its fault, because before that we hear how the war set off a wave of regional escalation. There's a risk that happened somehow, as some sort of immediate or I don't know, yeah, as Ginger said, some sort of miracle reaction, rather than these people are savages. Rather than Hezbollah, it's not that there's a coming maybe war. It's that Hezbollah has been firing at Jewish Israeli civilians every single day for the better part of the last year. That the Houthis in Yemen fire whenever they can at Israel. That Iran fired missiles at Israel. That when Iran doesn't fire missiles, people they pay for are firing missiles. None of this exists in the anti-Israel mind of a libertarian. Jonathan.
I like to point out the fact that he said Tel Aviv, given his strong support for Tel Aviv. You've seen that, Razi? He didn't say Jerusalem, he said Tel Aviv. And I think that's very revealing. You wouldn't say New York instead of Washington, right? It shows his motivations. I think it's revealing of what he really thinks about Israel. He wouldn't even say Jerusalem. It's completely, illegitimate that Israel wants to have Jerusalem as its capital. And I don't even get what's libertarian about. Where does he talk about limited government? Where does he talk about anything that's libertarian? This is just leftist stuff. I don't understand the libertarianism here. What else is there? Yeah, I don't get why. Why does the US needs to stop? Because what is the ethical standard? What is the immorality here? We're spending a lot of money. A lot of people are dying. Why is it bad? What is his moral standard? It doesn't even say. Some of the libertarians say there's the NAP principle, right? It breaks the NAP. It doesn't even say something like that. It just says there's a lot of suffering. We spend a lot of money, and therefore it's bad. I don't see how is that even a Cato Institute type of position. Maybe you guys know more about how is that even libertarian.
Yeah, NAP, for people who are not following libertarianism, is non-aggression principle. By the way, I made a mistake. I thought it was the end of the article because there was a read more, and apparently there's a lot more. I don't know if you guys want to stick around and do the rest, but you decide. Marco.
Well, this is the bit when he starts making a point he wants to make, that America stop spending money on something that doesn't concern you because it's so far away. We don't see the reason why this thing happened. And look at Israel now. It's defending itself, and it's risking to escalate this thing. It's escalation. Israel defends itself unusually a bit more forcefully than it's done in the past. And so we must stop escalation because, wow, the response is a bit too good for Israel. They've never done this before. They never hammered back Hamas as much as they've done now. Even though not remotely enough, this thing should have been done and dusted by now. But never mind. And of course, Iran, the people behind October 7, is intervening by trying to stop this reaction, the strong reaction for Israel. So it's arming and supplying weapons and money to its proxies all around, Syria, Yemen. Yemen itself, to be honest, just look at the response of Israel there. They bombed two fuel depots to make a big scene and lots of smoke and stuff. But really, they haven't done much of escalation under the point of view. They just kind of made the point: if we want to hit you, we can hit you. But they didn't go beyond that. But yeah, and effectively, his point here is stop sending money to Israel because we don't want Israel to defend itself. It's too expensive, and it doesn't really help you, America, because it's not your interest. Ignoring totally the fact that, first, as I said earlier on, US citizens are held hostage. US interest is in Israel. And to be honest, right now, at this point, Iran has made itself quite clear a threat for civilization and Western interest by arming the Houthis and stopping, if anything else, the trade routes through the Red Sea. So in itself, if that's not American interest, tell me what.
Yeah. And if you wanted to defend capitalism, surely that would be one essential means of doing so. I mean, when in this article he refers to Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and Iran, yeah, all of Israel's enemies. They'd be Israel's enemies anyway, regardless of what was happening in Gaza right now. And of course, they were quite happy to either fire rockets or drones either from their soil or allow them to pass through their airspace on their way towards attacking Israel only recently. So it's evident what's going on anyway. And of course, it's not till you get to the end of these two paragraphs here that you just read, which is basically the crux of it. The risks of regional war will remain elevated as long as Israel's campaign in Gaza continues. So please stop, is the hidden message there, or not so hidden message. It's just stop your campaign in Gaza and all of this goes away. Well, of course it doesn't, does it? It just comes back again stronger, harder, and eventually it will affect the US as well.
Yeah, by the way, I don't know why I'm doing running updates of this troll who talked about human rights, and then 9/11 was an inside job, and now October 7th was done by the IDF. That's the latest thing. But it is interesting. First of all, it's always good to remember that those who support savages are also savages. They may not have the balls to go out and be savages outside of their mom's basement or wherever he's writing from. But yeah, you can see that people don't want me to read the next paragraphs. But yeah, there's 4 more left. We'll read them in pairs of 2 and get it over with quickly. Is that a no, Jonathan?
You're putting us through hell here. Yeah, sure. Let's.
We'll make it through it. This is this is for the greater good, or whatever libertarians believe in, right? All right. Short of direct military intervention, the US has cast the full weight of its political, economic, and military might behind Israel. By casting multiple vetoes at the UN Security Council, approving more than 100 arms transfers worth over $41 billion, passing roughly $15 billion in additional military aid, and overseeing a massive US military buildup in the Middle East, the Biden administration has placed the US at the center of Israel's war in Gaza. American foreign policy in the Middle East has been dysfunctional for decades, and the imbalanced relationship between the US and Israel is at the core of that flawed regional strategy. Washington's reflexive embrace of Israel has impaired its ability to think clearly about the Middle East, a region of limited strategic importance to the US, given America's energy independence. At a time when the US finds itself overextended abroad and facing serious political and economic troubles at home, Washington is following Israel deeper into the abyss. Jonathan.
Deeper into the abyss. Yeah, it's all a dark abyss. You started off being so academic and eloquent, and now it's a dark abyss. It's very silly. It shows a very, I think the way they are approaching this, they try to grab you with appearing intellectual, with appearing kind of rational, and then they pull you down this rabbit hole, and then the language starts to become more colorful, with more what was the other, the carnage, the abyss, the famine, it's basically the Holocaust, what's going on there. That's the imagery is trying to insert to our brains, this evil guy.
Marco.
I mean, to argue that the Middle East in this day and age is of limited strategic importance for the US is a bit, making up reality as you go along, isn't it? And also, what's this thing that America is energy independent now? It used to be energy independent where Trump was president, but then Biden, if you can distinguish them, Biden went off and started making it energy dependent again. So even this is just an excuse to make it look like America is busy doing its own thing, and it doesn't have time to deal with Israel. It's just a distraction. Again, red herring of the few billions that they are giving to Israel, and this suddenly it slips into, as Jonathan mentioned, this abyss business. It's like you lost the argument. Now you're trying to make it emotional, based on emotionalism, and trying to make it look like following Israel is going to the abyss. Well, I'll show you what the abyss is if Israel loses. The abyss looks like you're going to wear a burqa for the rest of your days and kneel in front of a mosque for 5 times a day. It's like, oh, for God's sake, talk about the evasion of this guy.
And of course, the line at the beginning of the section you just read, that the US has cast the full weight of its political, economic, and military might behind Israel. Blimey, is that really the US's full weight? Is that what a country can expect when its full weight is thrown behind you? Because it doesn't seem like it, does it? It's I mean, they've shown some support, but full weight, definitely not. And of course, yes, Marco mentioned about the energy independence there. But I think also the line towards the end of the section, the fact that the US is facing serious political and economic troubles at home. I always love that technique when you point out what's going on over here, and say, no, we should be focusing on that solely. We can't be looking anywhere else in the world. We've got our own problems. Yeah, your own problems exist, and they're of your own making. And we've seen that both political parties making a proper hash of things lately. But that is completely academic and irrelevant when it comes to support for Israel, support for the ideals that America stands for, support for civilization.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that the US is fully supporting Israel while Biden, again, is repeating Hamas talking points, is holding weapons, is preventing or not preventing, but telling Israel not to engage the other countries that are attacking daily attacks on Israeli civilian targets. This is, unprecedentedly anti-Israel government, and but it's not anti-Israel enough. Israel still exists, and that is the problem for some of these people. By the way, I think from time to time there's some parody Twitter account parodying somebody that is so good that I end up believing it, and then I realize it's a parody. I think that might be the case with this troll that I've mentioned earlier, because now his latest was what was it? We need better news sources, and he mentions Press TV and Russia Today. So the channels of the Iranian theocracy and the Russian dictatorship is what he thinks is better. Anyway, speaking of that kind of journalism, here are the last two. Well, this is op-ed, but I'm sure it could appear in either of those mentioned. Here are the last two paragraphs. Short of direct military intervention, the U.S. Oh, no, that says I already read this. These are the last two paragraphs. Oh, no, you could have gone through those two. Is there any sliver of hope? After Biden dropped out of the presidential race, Kamala Harris is now the Democratic frontrunner and has an opportunity to change course on Israel and Gaza. Although Harris has urged Israel to do more to address the, quote, immense scale of suffering, end quote, in Gaza, she has remained steadfast in her backing of Israel, much like Biden. Rhetoric devoid of a policy change is not enough. Moreover, a Trump victory would likely offer no respite given his strong support for Tel Aviv and comments that he would let Israel, quote, finish the job in Gaza. Though the future of the White House is uncertain, it should be abundantly clear to all that by continuing to subsidize Israel's war in Gaza, the U.S. is setting up itself and the Middle East for disaster. Washington needs to end its bipartisan blank check support for Israel and extricate itself from this tragedy. All right, I'm scrolling all the way down to the page. It is finally over. Yeah, this is Jonathan where he mentioned Tel Aviv. I was wondering what you're talking about, but this is yeah, he mentions Tel Aviv. That's a thing that anti-Israel people do all the time. Jerusalem is the capital, has always been the capital. It's the seat of government. You know, countries do get to decide what their capital is going to be, but if you don't consider the country legitimate, you can decide for them. Luckily, this guy doesn't decide. Luckily, I don't think the Libertarian Party candidate, whoever he or she or they them are, will become the president. So yeah, and the U.S. embassy is in Jerusalem. So official U.S. policy is to acknowledge that Israel can choose its own capital. Thank you very much. Yeah, Jonathan, final thoughts.
Final thought, I find it funny that he is actually kind of supporting Kamala Harris as a libertarian. It's a bit odd, isn't it? And I do find it to be the case, paradoxically, that a lot of libertarians, they end up actually supporting policies that are eerily similar to those of people on the radical left. Perhaps it is revealing of their true nature. No, what else is there to say? It's just a despicable article. The Time magazine was said that who was the person of the year in the 30s? Was it Stalin, the person of the year? They wanted to have Hitler as the person of the year in 1939, if I'm not mistaken. Given the history, it's not too surprising. Yeah, what else? Is that where we say where to go if they want to?
I was gonna go to Marco and Richard first, but if you want to let people know now, you can do. If you're eager to leave because you've had enough, you can do it now.
I think our viewers have had enough of this nonsense. So if you want to,
Well, the nonsense is the article, which we were done with. Now all we have left is our commentary, which is the good part of the show.
right, our commentary, right. So yes, this evil guy, and these evil libertarians, they want Israel capital to be Tel Aviv if it's even allowed to exist. They don't acknowledge October 7th. They don't acknowledge anything of the evil that has happened. They don't have cause and effect. They don't tell us why we're here. They don't acknowledge that. They only are against the good because it's being good, and they are supporting evil because it's evil. That's the commentary.
Yeah, and no, they don't allow for Israel to exist. They might say Tel Aviv as if it's they acknowledge, unlike maybe Iran, who just calls it the Zionist entity, they acknowledge that Israel is a thing, but it's a thing they want to no longer be a thing. And this is why they write articles like this. They would love to see the day that the Palestinian cause achieves its goal, which is the annihilation of the state of Israel and the annihilation of all the people in the state of Israel. Marco.
I mean, to talk about a Trump victory and then saying Tel Aviv, knowing very well that was Trump who moved the embassies in Jerusalem, it's just betraying what this guy is actually pushing. He's pushing his own agenda. His agenda is anti-Semitic and anti-Israel. But just also look at how badly this thing is dated already, because Kamala Harris, she actually boycotted with the other 60 or 70 jihadi, pro-jihadi Congress. Yeah, the Democrat Congress and senators, I don't know. Yeah, she's a senator, isn't she? So the speech from Netanyahu. So to now pretend that Kamala Harris is going to be helping Israel with the same kind of conviction that Trump might is just trying to give a leg up to your favorite candidate, which in itself I don't understand why it would side behind her, but never mind. this guy clearly is not a great asset for the Cato Institute. And if I were them, I would either ask him to rein back a bit or be a bit more objective, because he's made a tit of himself.
Yeah, and when he's talking earlier about the full weight of the US behind Israel, and his preferred candidate is Kamala Harris, who, as Marcus said, didn't show up to the speech of Netanyahu and chose instead implicitly to stand with, effectively to stand with the flag burners outside. So that's obviously his preferred course of action. And what has this author explicitly not referred to, despite, as I said before, it being his specialism? He's not referred to the political Islam. And that is glaringly absent from this article, because I mean that is the core of the issue in the Middle East. And if you don't shine a light on that, and if you don't use your supposed expertise to underline why we've got to this point, and not make it look like it's US's support of Israel that's got here, and your proposed solution, or this guy's proposed solution, is simply to withdraw and forget about it. That's what Israel and the US should do from Gaza. Just withdraw and forget about it. Everything will be fine. That's what led to October the 7th. That is what lead to a bigger October the 7th in the future. So the gaping hole of political Islam, to me, it goes hand in hand with the anti-Semitism.
So Kamala Harris's boycott of Netanyahu's speech was not mentioned in this opinion piece. So did it really happen? I mean, when he mentions Tel Aviv as the capital of Israel, doesn't it make it so? Look, reality is not a part of these people's worldview. So maybe, if we just read his stuff and not actually look at what's going on in the world, maybe again, maybe like the Guardian, he knows his audience and treats them accordingly. But yeah, anyway, thank you, Apollo Zeus, for the super chat. Apollo Zeus asks, the legacy of Murray Rothbard's ideas relating to this topic? I think so, yeah. I think Murray Rothbard is probably one of the more influential people in the bad sense on the libertarian movement. Thank you, Garbled Words, for the super chat. Garbled Words says, do you know about the history of libertarians and Palestinians going back to the 70s? I want to learn more about these strange bedfellows. Well, that makes one of us. I want to learn less. I already know more than I'd like to. And luckily, after a very, very long episode, which might even be shorter than tomorrow's episode, we'll see. Yeah, again, a reminder, if you thought this was bad, wait till you see what we talk about tomorrow. Yeah, it only gets worse, but that's why we're here, to make sure the world might at some point reverse course. If you want it to reverse course and you want to help it reverse course, like, comment, share, subscribe if you're not subscribed, and go to wherever Jonathan tells you next.
Yes, go to my Substack, philosophyIneeded.com, going on live stream on Saturday with Luke Travers. It's going to be very exciting.
And where Marco and Richard tell you.
Which is the Briefly Objective, shorter content in the description below. There's a link to it with the short videos for your social media feeds on all the points that we cover on this channel across all the shows, to make sure it's super crystal clear with added imagery to really ram the point home.
Like, subscribe, and share.
Thank you.
And Razi Ginsburg on X, you may have noticed I was pretty angry on this show. You'll notice it even more if you follow me on X, but I'm only angry at those who deserve my anger. I will not, I won't waste all my anger on X between now and tomorrow's show, because the BBC deserves what is coming to them on tomorrow's episode of the reality show. Make sure you give that a preemptive like if you can, and if you think that's important content, that'll help people see more of it, or more people see it. That's how the algorithm works. And of course, join us for the Daily Objective, where I interview Tal Tzfani, the CEO and president of the Ayn Rand Institute. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Bye.